Hi, I'm Mike Bolland from the We're Not Stumped podcast. You don't know what the We're Not Stumped podcast is? Come on. I talk about the disabled community with a lot of other people from the same community, with a little bit of a highlight on the limb loss community because that's the community I am part. A couple weeks ago, I introduced a concept that I came up with myself, single-handedly. As you can see, I only have one hand. Single-handedly. It's called the triple A's of being in the disabled or the limb loss community. What are those triple A's? Alone. The feeling of being alone. Number 2, advocacy. Number 3, attitude. 2 weeks ago, I talked about all of those high level. Last week, I kind of hit on the alone part. And I told you some tips and tricks and things that you're starting to feel like you're alone because of the way you are. You go out in public, everybody's staring at you. There's some tips and tricks in that podcast, that video, that you can use to make things better for you. Well, this week, guess what I'm doing this week? Yeah, the second A, advocacy. We're going to talk about advocacy and the different ways you can do it. Advocacy is actually a two-pronged topic. There's a self-advocacy, there's things you have to do for yourself, but there's things you can do for the community as a whole as well. So let's take a deep dive into A number 2. Looks like I don't have two hands. Why am I on number 2? A number 2, advocacy. We're going to do that right now. So what does advocacy look like? And by the way, if you are watching this video, yes, you can tell I got notes. I think it's very important what I have to say. So yes, I took notes. And if you're just listening to this podcast, heck, this is all off the top of my head. These things are just coming to me naturally. So let's get back into advocacy. And I'll tell you what, you know why the A is so important in alone and then advocacy? Because if you have the feeling of being alone, which makes you generally feel a little depressed, it's going to be harder for you to be your own advocate. And if you're not your own advocate, you're not going to advocate for anyone else. So that's why alone is so important. But let's get into the self-advocacy part here. So what does it look like? Well, I'll tell you, being a self-advocate, here's what that looks like. Hey, my prosthetic is a little tight. Can you make an adjustment? That is you speaking up for yourself. And what does it look like for the community? The community as a whole? When you see something, you say something. But you're not going to see something and say something if you feel alone. And if you're not advocating for yourself, you are probably not going to advocate for others. That's why it's so important. So what might you see out there gallivanting around? Well, maybe a place that doesn't have wheelchair access. You know how difficult that is? You could be an advocate for others. You don't have to just, I have one hand. It doesn't mean I'm just speaking up for people with one hand. Be an advocate for others. That's what it looks like. And that's what we need from you. But there's some steps to get there. So what is the role of self-advocacy and what are some of the things you can do? Well, number 1, you could ask for more rehab time. What if your rehab time runs out and they just say, hey, you know what, sorry, your insurance didn't cover anymore, this or that, and they give you the runaround? Ask for more. Be that squeaky wheel. Be your own advocate. What if, like this old prosthetic, so you have to be watching the video too to see some of these great props that I have. This is a prosthetic. Well, I'm not gonna say what decade it's from because that would date me. But let's just say it's old. This thing doesn't fit me anymore. You can tell, it's very small. What if your prosthetic doesn't fit you anymore? Or is it fitting correctly? I'll tell you what you do. You go talk to your prosthetist and make sure your prosthetic fits the way you need it to fit. And here's tip number 3 for the self-advocacy. And I'll tell you what, this is the hardest part. People don't know how to treat you anymore. These could be friends and neighbors and family that suddenly see you as different. And they may not know how to treat you anymore. Well, do yourself a favor. Help them. Help them help you. If you do need help, it's okay to ask for it. If you don't need help, it's okay to say, I got this. Be your own mouthpiece. Speak for yourself. Once you have mastered that self-advocacy, guess what? You're going to see things all around you, all around the world, and you are going to be driven to say something. And by the way, I'm going to keep this prosthetic on the rest of the time. It's kind of fun. It's from a long time ago, like I said, but it looks kind of cool. I always liked it. It's the first one I ever had, so don't make fun of it. So what can you do? If you see something visible, maybe something in a school, a public area, that makes it difficult for people to access, say something. You can say something. That's group advocacy. That is the journey of everyone here. That is helping the community as a whole. Maybe you see the need in your area. There's no support group. There's no meetup. There is nothing. You can do it. Once you get through your own self-advocacy and you start feeling better about yourself, you're going to see things like that too. You know what? I can help others. I have a voice. There's other people out there that have a voice. And there's other people that need to hear these voices. There are multiple former guests of the We're Not Stumped podcast who started their own support group. They did it. They just did it. They figured out how, because they were already fighting for themselves. It was time to fight for others. They didn't even know how they started. That was Kayla Inman and John Werner. They didn't even know what they were doing, but they started one and they feel better about themselves because they did. Once you get through your self-advocacy and start advocating for others, guess who's going to feel good? Both you and the people you are helping. And I have a quote about this from a former guest. When you speak the truth, it creates permission for others to do the same. You never know whose life you're changing just by being visible and vocal. You can do that as well. And once you get those things going, you can keep going. You can join a support group. Maybe you feel you don't need one. Your presence at a support group may help others. You can become a peer visitor. I know the Amputee Coalition has that. And so do other organizations that become a peer visitor. And if there's no organization around you that has peer visiting, there's hospitals that don't want to talk to you. There's prosthetists that don't want to talk to you. There's rehab facilities that don't want to talk to you. Go out and do it. I have another great quote from someone who has been on the We're Not Stumped podcast. You don't have to be a politician or a public speaker. If you've ever told someone you're not alone, you're already an advocate. How great is that? So here's where it comes full circle. And I'm going to read off my notes. Of course, if you're just listening to the podcast, I'm not using any notes at all. But you know what? Right now, actually, maybe you can hear them a little bit. Who cares? I'm going to read off these notes. When you move from feeling alone to finding your voice, you step into something more powerful, and that's advocacy. And that voice, it doesn't matter. It doesn't just lift you, it lifts others as well. So what are your thoughts? You know, these hooks, I gotta be honest, I remember they scratch pretty good. So what are your thoughts on what I'm talking about? Whether it be the whole concept of the triple A's, the alone, the advocacy, or the attitude, or any of the segments I talked about so far, the deep dive into being alone. What I talked about today, the advocacy. What are your thoughts on that? Leave them in the comments. Reach out to me. Reach out to me at mike@we'renotstumped.com. And remember, the most powerful thing you could do for you and others is advocate.